The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
This could only happen to your Vancouver Canucks. Are we about to see a repeat of the 2020 offseason? Dear God, I hope not. Come on.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks and also a Canucks writer since 2013, currently with Daily Hive Vancouver. Before we dive into today's episode, with hopefully a bit of optimism, but man, oh man, I'm feeling negative right now. Again, got to let you know that you are tuning to Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you go subscribe, like, follow, leave a comment, do it all for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. In 10 seconds, got to shout out the people, okay? You guys got us to 2K subs on YouTube. You know, me and Kyle had a good cry over it, okay? We're emotional beasts, and you're going to hear that on the first few minutes of Locked On Canucks because, man, oh, man, the doom and gloom of being a Canucks fan is hitting me this morning, okay? It's hitting me. More on that coming up. We're also going to get into the Canucks coaching hires here. Who the F is Yogi? Who is he? The Canucks' new assistant coach. We'll also talk about some coaching X factors and some other changes that you'll see in terms of the Canucks coaching staff next season. Before we get into all that, got to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download that Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. A report came out yesterday from Rick Dhaliwal of Czech TV that no Canucks free agents aside from Tyler Myers are interested in a pay cut. And my initial reaction, and I think Kyle shares this too again, Kyle Ballin, my co-host, not here today, going to another wedding, okay? It's time for another 5-day chocolate Bacardi hangover. Dude, you're an animal, man. Come on. Just drink some beer and wine like a normal person, Kyle. Unbelievable. But Rick Dhaliwal again reporting that Tyler Myers is the only Canucks free agent who is interested in taking a pay cut. Now, you know, emotionally, I was hit with that doom and gloom at first because, again, this team after the 2020 season should have been on the rise. Kyle and I, on our old network, I remember Kyle saying that the Canucks were going to win the North Division. And, yeah, we all know that did not happen. All right. And a big part of why that was the case was because they let everyone walk in free agency. You know, shout out to my boss man over at Daily Hive, Rob Williams, Rob the hockey guy. He had that famous tweet that said, "There's no before free agency hit, there's no way the Canucks can lose Markstrom, Tanev, Toffoli, and Stetcher. Can they?" And yeah, they did. And now we're faced with a similar situation here. And of course, the big three free agents in Vancouver are Zadorov, Joshua, and Elias Lindholm. You know, we can throw in other guys too, like Tyler Myers, Ian Cole, Casey DeSmith, I think is as good as gone. And let's throw in Philip Hronek to that equation too, because if this guy is truly going to command $8 million, I don't think the Canucks are going to buck up and pay that, and nor should they, to be honest. And as much Hronek hate as there is out there, we've touched on it before, every dayers know, you don't want to really lose that guy. You don't want to pay him $8 million, but he's still a legitimate top four defenseman, a low-end, first pairing right shot defenseman. You don't want to lose that guy. Now, again, you look at those three big free agents I mentioned, the UFAs, Lindholm, Zadorov, and Joshua. We touched on Dakota Joshua yesterday, okay? Make sure you go check out that episode where we talked about Dakota Joshua's potential next contract, the rumors about him being interested in going to the Maple Leafs, and, you know, some potential replacements if he does walk. We touched on all that on yesterday's episode. Go check it out if you haven't already. But I kind of tabled the odds of the Canucks keeping Joshua at this point at 25%. And that's just me reading the tea leaves in terms of what Alvin's saying, the potential contract he could demand, which I said in yesterday's episode. If he truly chases the bag, I believe he can get more than $4 million a season. You look historically at guys like, I know the bad example is Matt Bolesky when he signed that 5-year, $21 million deal, I believe, or $19 million deal. You know, with his percentage of the cap base to now, Dakota Joshua scored at a very similar rate. I don't think he's going to pull a Matt Bolesky and turn it into nothing. But again, I do believe Joshua could command over $4 million. Nikita Zadorov. The Canucks have reportedly already offered him a contract, 5 years, $4.5 million. He rejected it. Nikita Zadorov is going to get over $5 million on the free agent market. And he said in interviews already that he wants term. He believes he can play to 35, 36 years old, and he's 29 right now. So you know Nikita Zadorov wants at least 5 years, maybe even 5 to 7 years. And if you're going to pay that amount of money, you better hope that Zadorov is the guy that showed up in the playoffs, right? That was a legitimate number 3 defenseman logging the big minutes for your Vancouver Canucks. The problem with Zadorov has been the inconsistency throughout his NHL career. And hey, we saw that in Vancouver as well. Now, I think what gives you hope if you're a fan of Nikita Zadorov is he struggled when he first came to Vancouver. And then he got that suspension, and then he came back, and all of a sudden he was a legitimate top 4 guy. But there's massive risk with paying Zadorov that kind of money. If he is the player he's in the playoffs, 5 times 5-ish is going to be completely worth it, but there's no guarantee that that's the case. And then finally, Elias Lindholm. Again, reports suggesting that Canucks players are already trying to convince this guy to stay in Vancouver. But yeah, we talked about it before. One of our first episodes after the Canucks got eliminated from the playoffs. Lindholm can probably command $7 million plus. Even though he had a down season, he does a bit of everything out there, okay? A former Selke runner-up, former 40-goal guy. And you saw in the playoffs, he was arguably the best Canuck in the second round, led the team in points, one of the best Canuck performers in the playoffs. This guy, and again, the UFA center market is really bleak. I believe there's 5 guys who have over 30 points, and there's Jack Roslovic, Max Domi, Alex Wenberg, Elias Lindholm, and I'm missing one. But there's not a lot of big names in the center market is my point. A team with cap space, and there are teams out there with cap space, a team with cap space could easily pay this guy to be like a number 2 center, maybe even pushing $8 million a season. Perhaps the Detroit Red Wings. The bottom feeders out there too. Look at the Nashville Predators. They could use a center as well. They got a ton of cap space. There are teams out there that could give Elias Lindholm a lot of money. So are we about to see a repeat of 2020? And is that, as doomy and gloomy as I'm making it sound? Now, here's the one caveat about Doliola's report, right? And the report that Vancouver Canucks free agents aren't interested in taking a pay cut. Of course, Zadorov and Joshua and Lindholm aren't interested in taking a pay cut. I mean, Zadorov, I think, was kind of paid a little under his market value last season, but compared to his NHL career, that $3.75 million range, he's been that kind of player. A low-end top 4 guy, sub $5 million for the last 6 seasons. That guy is looking to get paid. He played at a discount for a long time. And of course, Dakota Joshua on the short-term deal, almost making league minimum. Of course, he's looking for a raise. None of these should be a surprise. And I think Ian Cole, again, they offered him another contract. AFP Analytics has his next contract at around $2.1 million. He probably wants to be looking around the same price range, $3 million, right? So, again, to me, this isn't quite the 2020 offseason, but it's comparable if the Canucks do lose everyone, right? I mean, back in 2020, I think it made sense for Markstrom to walk. Stetcher was an emotional attachment to him based on the fact that he'd really blossomed into an NHLer in Vancouver, the pride of Richmond, but it was Tanev and Toffoli. Those losses hurt. And when I do look at this Canucks free agent crop and who might walk, Zadorov, Lindholm, and Joshua, all of them walking hurt to a certain extent. And you look at, again, there's not really many replacements out for Lindholm in free agency, but the Canucks can get by with lesser players in that third line center spot. So that, even though he's the most valuable player of the 3, arguably the least painful in terms of the loss. But Zadorov and Joshua, there just aren't that many players on the free agent market that are as physical as either of those guys. So are the Canucks about to have another offseason like 2020? I hope not, okay? I know Kyle and I said on the episode yesterday about Dakota Joshua. You really want to try to find a way to keep this guy. I think if you can get him in, 4 years around $3.5 million, that's a good contract for this team. I don't really see a ton of regression with Dakota Joshua, but worth noting, he did shoot at 21% this season, so maybe a bit of shooting regression, But in terms of the value he brings as a physical presence, as a top penalty killer, Dakota Joshua does have some good value. Even though he's likely to experience some shooting regression, I still think $3.5 million, that kind of range could be worth it for Dakota Joshua. And Nikita Zadorov to me is the biggest wild card, okay? Because his NHL career has been up and down. Now, I like to believe that with this coaching staff, with Adam Foote, with Sergei Gonchar, they brought the best out of Nikita Zadorov. I truly believe that. But again, 5 times 5 is a big number. He's a big guy, but it's a big number for Zadorov. Let me know in the comments, of those 3 UFAs, if you had to pick one, which one are you keeping? And for the guy you pick, what do you think the contract's going to look like, okay? Let us know in the comments. Hit us up on Twitter, wherever you follow us, man. You can find us. I'll throw my cell phone number if you want. Why not? Hit me up for that as well. On the other side, let's talk about some of the changes from yesterday, okay? The Canucks made some announcements in terms of their coaching staff. Yogi Svejkovsky, I think I butchered that. He is now your new Canucks assistant coach. And he's had local connections for a long time, but who the F is this guy? Let's talk about it on the other side. Before we do that, we got to shout out our friends, okay? Our friends help us make tens of dollars here on Locked On Canucks, and that sponsor today is Game Time. All right, you know the deal. Game Time, they got my back. You know why? Because I'm cheap. I don't want to be paying full value for tickets. I want tickets at a discount. And Game Time, they got that lowest price guarantee, baby. So you know they're offering that, okay? And right now, Game Time, you know, they're all about the NBA Finals, okay? Game Time, they make getting to the NBA Finals, getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. And guess what? If you're in Dallas, you're in Boston, or you're going to be in the area, you're flying out, whatever it is, if you're in that area, prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Wow. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets, okay? And if you're not an NBA guy, if you're sticking local here in beautiful Vancouver, you know, BC Lions are coming back. 50 Cent coming in about a week or so. And Vancouver Canadians baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You can find it all on Game Time, okay? And again, the lowest price guarantee. And if they don't live up to that lowest price guarantee, they will credit you with 110% of the difference. Game Time, they're for the people, baby. So make sure that you take the guesswork out of buying NBA's Finals tickets or whatever other tickets you look for with Game Time. Download that Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. You're back here on Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs. Not joined by Kyle Bowen today, but shout out to Kyle Bowen, okay? Making those little bumps in between the segments. The guy's got all these skills that I don't have, okay? You know, I'm just here on Locked On Canucks trying to coast by on the good looks. And hey, if you're listening on the podcast, that's okay. If you're watching on YouTube, though, you get to see this this beautiful scrawny face, okay? Speaking of beautiful faces, okay, the Canucks have promoted a beautiful face, okay, and a guy with a beautiful name, okay, Yogi Svejkovsky, the pride of the Czech Republic, okay. And you know what? His real name is Yaroslav Svejkovsky, but I trust a guy named Yogi a little bit more, okay. Now, this was a bit of a surprise free agent hire, I would say, because you know, some of the names rumored about, we talked about on the show, were connections to Rick Tocchet in the past. And I think Rick Tocchet mentioned in the press conference yesterday that he did spend some time looking outside. But as Patrick Alvin said in the press conference with media, you know, they quickly came to the realization that Yogi Svejkovsky was the right candidate to take over the assistant coaching role. But for people locally who have maybe their kids in minor hockey or played minor hockey themselves, it might be a bit bizarre to see Yogi behind the Canucks bench, because this guy was a coach for a long time locally with the Vancouver Giants, with the Delta Ice Hockey Academy, okay? teaching the U17, teaching the kids, okay? Teaching the teenagers how to play. Okay, but the more you hear about this guy, the more it seems like, maybe he could be a good fit for the Canucks organization. And what have we talked about time and time again is that the Canucks need some help with the power play. And this is a guy who didn't have a long NHL career. It was cut short by injuries, post-concussion syndrome at the age of 25. But this is a guy with skill, okay? As a rookie in the NHL, he had a 4-goal game. He is currently the only player in Washington Capitals history, the only rookie, I should say, to have a 4-goal game, okay? He helped the Capitals win 8-3 over the Buffalo Sabres back in 1996-97. So the guy's got skill, and hey, that's why he's been a skills coach for a long time. But the more and more you hear about this guy, he wasn't really just a skills coach. A lot of skills coaches will stay home when the team goes on road trips, but this season, Yogi Svejkovsky started traveling around the Vancouver Canucks. Spent a lot of time working with Vancouver Canucks who were injured in terms of getting them back into the lineup. And look at some of the two guys that come to my mind who spent a lot of time injured this season, and it was Carson Soucy and Dakota Joshua. Both of those guys, when they returned to the lineup, they came back strong. Carson Soucy looked like he didn't miss a beat. And again, different player, okay? Wasn't putting up the points, even though he's done so in the past, but just a really solid, safe game from Carson Soucy. And, through 1 year of that 3-year deal, that contract's looking like a bit of a steal. And I got to be honest, at the time, I don't know if I was the biggest fan of that contract, all right? You're paying a guy $3+ million. He's only played in bottom pairing roles. There was some risk with that deal, but Carson Soucy has proved me wrong so far. And I love it when players shove it up my rear end, okay? Hey, it is what it is. It is what it is. Dakota Joshua as well, okay? Spent a lot of time, almost 2 months injured this season after breaking his hand. And what does he do? He comes back to the lineup, scores a couple goals before the end of the season. In the playoffs, it was up and down, but he had some huge games for the Vancouver Canucks. And I know he kind of inflated his numbers based off of, really bringing it in a couple of different rounds there, or bringing a couple of different games, I should say. But, 8 points in 13 playoff games, nothing to sneeze at, okay? So I'm interested to see what Yogi can do in a more full role at the Canucks organization. And it sounded like this guy was getting offers from around the NHL too. There were other teams that were reportedly interested in his services as an assistant coach. And, there was one story that he shared on local radio yesterday where after his career was cut short at the age of 25, he was offered an assistant coaching role with the Vancouver Giants. And he said that his dad told him, "You're not ready to be an assistant coach. What do you know about coaching?" And I think that speaks to a guy who's, got a great work ethic and is willing to do what it takes to get better. And Rick talked yesterday in the press conference as well that with Yogi, he was impressed by his work ethic. And one thing that impressed Tocchet is that, players were coming up to his office to Tocchet thought they were coming to talk to him. And they were like, "No, we're actually looking for Yogi." So Tocchet, man, putting your ego aside, being happy for the guy, giving him an opportunity. And he name checked JT Miller and Elias Pettersson as guys that would come up and, again, bypass Tocchet's office to go talk to Yogi Bear. All right. We'll talk a bit more about the other coaching changes as we wrap up the show here on Locked On Canucks. Again, it is your Canucks every day. Okay, and there's a couple of coaching X factors that I want to talk about as well. The names very well. Let's talk about on the other side here on Locked On Canucks.
Man, we're going to have a lot of fun tonight in Vancouver, all my real fans.
All right. You're back here on Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every day. My name is Trevor Beggs, the co-host here, but today I'm the solo dolo host. Again, Kyle Bowen. It's 10:15 in the morning in Calgary. I talked to this guy in the morning. He's already sipping chocolate Bacardi. You got a problem, buddy. Kyle Bowen's got a problem, okay? Pray for Kyle Bowen, okay? Unbelievable stuff. We're going to get to a couple of your comments before we wrap up the show, but I do want to talk about the coaching X factors here. And you know very well, it's Daniel and Henrik Sedin. So Tocchet and Alvin spoke about Daniel and Henrik Sedin yesterday. And they said they're going to have increased roles with the team. And in fact, there's a good chance that, one of the twins will travel on the road with the Canucks and they'll alternate. Okay. These guys got families. Okay. They're also climbing the gross grind every second day, I hear. So it makes sense that, maybe only one of them goes. Now, I'm curious if the players will know which twin is on the road trip when they are on the road trip, but that is another story. Okay. Now, Henrik and Daniel Sedin, we saw some clips of them teaching the power play in the playoffs. Okay. I think there was clips of Sedin's out there with Gonchar, trying to emulate what a power play could look like. Now, unfortunately, it didn't do much for the Canucks in the playoffs themselves. So, but again, the Sedins, we saw it here in Vancouver for almost 20 years, incredibly creative players. And, I think about how the power play has changed over time, and not just with the Canucks, but across the NHL. And there just seems to be more movement out there. You don't really see the big slappers from the point anymore. It's guys working pucks through traffic. A lot of guys moving their feet more in the power play. Whereas the Sedins just kind of knew where to find each other and to find their teammates. Their passing was so crisp. And I do think the Sedins have a nature of adaptability to them, which makes me think that they're going to be successful coaches in the NHL level in terms of, helping out with the power play. And Talkin mentioned it yesterday too, the Canucks are looking for a skills coach to replace Yogi. I kind of wonder if the Sedins are the guys that kind of step into that role, and maybe they share the role, right? They're already working in player development. Again, two of the most cerebral players in Canucks history, in NHL history. I think they could be good guys to be the Canucks' next skills coach as well. We'll see if they move that direction, if the Sedins continue to have a bit of a mixed player development, power play specialist kind of role with this team. Now, the last thing to kind of talk about the coaching staff too is who's going to take over the PK. And I think the natural answer is Adam Foote. Adam Foote, again, in the 21st century, over the last 25 years, arguably one of the best penalty killers of his generation. And again, a lot of it was just being smart, staying in the lanes, blocking shots. What do we see with this Canucks power play when it was the bottom of the league? Is that they just opened up lanes left, right, and center by pinching, going to the wrong spots on the ice. A guy like Adam Foote, I think he had a role in the PK last season, right? Look at how active this guy's on the bench. When I was up in the booth, you look at the Canucks bench during a game, and Adam Foote is almost always talking to the guys on the team. He's a very vocal coach, and players have admitted to it as well, and how much that's meant to them as they've been on the ice. So I think it's a natural fit for Adam Foote to have a bigger role in terms of the penalty killing. Again, a lot of penalty killing has to come from the players themselves, and it's another reason why it'd be nice to keep Elias Lindholm around, even though I think he's, of those three UFAs, probably the least likely to stick. All right, let's get to a couple comments here before we wrap up this episode of Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every day. Infamous, one of the everydayers, one of the biggest beauties of the Locked On Canucks family, says, I hope we keep Z and Lindholm if possible. Now, my question to you, again, based on reports that none of these guys want to take a discount, based on contract projections, the Canucks have about $26 million of cap space, and they want a top six winger aside from, keeping Z and Lindholm and Joshua. Let's say you re-sign Zadorov at 5 years times 5.25, and Lindholm at 7 years times 7, so $12.5 million for Lindholm. Hronek's probably getting a $2 to $3 million upgrade. That leaves you about 12 to 14 million to round out the rest of your, get another top six winger and round out the rest of your forward group. I mean, it's possible. And now we're going to talk about it on another episode of Locked On Canucks, but Ilya Mikheyev, are the Canucks in a position where they got to either buy him out or trade him? Okay. Now, Popeye Sailor, again, it seems like keeping Zadorov is the not top priority among fans in this market, which makes sense, man. Popeye Sailor saying losing Zadorov would hurt. The other two, not so much. Again, based on what Lindholm could command, based on what Alvin's already said about Joshua, this is crazy for me to say, but I do think that Zadorov is the most likely to stick around at this point. Again, reading the tea leaves, okay? Zadorov golfing with JT Miller and Dan Murphy. Reports that Joshua might be interested in going to Toronto. Elias Lindholm being the best center available in unrestricted free agency. How are the Canucks going to afford to keep the best center in unrestricted free agency? And can't have him as his third line center. To me, as much as I think he'd be a great fit in Vancouver, and I hope he stays, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay. Now, Matt Folger. Now, this Matt Folger's dropping the cold hard truth. Okay, shout out to Matt Folger, another everyday. He says we're going to see big roster turnover. I think too many guys had career years for us to keep them. It makes that Game 7 loss all the more heartbreaking. We had lightning in a bottle this year. Now, Matt, turn that frown upside down, man. Okay, because we see this with other contending teams as well. You know, I'm going to go back to the Colorado Avalanche, who they found a way to bring Nazem Kadri in and help them win a Stanley Cup. You know, they found those depth guys like Andrew Cogliano and Darren Helm, the locker room guys, to come in on cheap deals and help out in the bottom six, bring that locker room presence, much like Ian Cole brought this year. There are ways for the Canucks to still be a contending team, okay? The core is in place with Besser, Miller, Pettersson, Hughes, Demko. Maybe you want to throw Hurong into that mix. I'm not quite there yet. There are ways for this Canucks team to be in the same realm that they were this year. Again, I do think the Canucks are Stanley Cup contenders moving forward. But that being said, if they lose everyone, how are you going to replace them, okay? But the thing that's important to remember for Matt and the rest of the Canucks fans is there's a different management team in place. This isn't the sad sack bleep show of the Jim Benning era. This is Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford. This is a team that, again, has shown so far that they deserve the benefit of the doubt from the Canucks fans. That's a management team who, again, Jim Rutherford, multiple cups with multiple organizations. Patrick Allvin has had way more hits than misses so far in terms of his acquisitions. They deserve the benefit of the doubt. Now, no one's going to be perfect. McKay signing doesn't look great. You know, that Dickinson for Stillman cap dump where you give a second-round pick, that doesn't look great. There's always going to be times where your GM doesn't win a trade. But for the most part, I think Patrick Allvin deserves the benefit of the doubt so far from Canucks fans. We got some more love for Zadorov here. I'll shout this out. Burn6 says Zadorov and Joshua must stay. Zadorov is better than a number 3 defenseman. That, for me, is a bit rich. Okay, I think at his peak, Zadorov is a number 3 defenseman on the team, much like he was this season. Again, you got a guy who's 29 years old, who's shown inconsistency throughout his career. Again, the optimist in me, and I don't know why I'm optimistic because I'm a Canucks fan, but the optimist in me does believe that Nikita Zadorov can be a number 3 defenseman with this coaching staff in this system. And he said it too. I think he's got a lot of gas in the tank. He skates really well for a guy his size. He's a really unique player. And I'm probably going to side with what Anthemius said when I mentioned that first comment. He said Z and Lindholm. I'm thinking Z and Joshua, sorry. Because I just don't think there's any way that the Canucks are going to be able to afford to keep Lindholm. If you can keep Zadorov and Joshua, sign Hronek to a short-term deal, and then have enough cap room to add a top 6 winger and then round out with kind of depth bargain pieces, I think that is, in 10 seconds, the Canucks' path for this offseason. Again, we'll break it down and more so on other episodes of Locked On Canucks once Kyle Bowen is back from his week-long chocolate Bacardi binge, okay? Kyle Bowen, one love to that guy, okay? Kyle Bowen, the GOAT. Let's get out of here. Shout out to the everydayers, the occasional listeners, the first-time listeners, the new subscribers, and those of you who join us on the live YouTube show. We love each and every one of you, whenever you're listening, wherever you're listening. And then for those of you who do join us on YouTube, thanks again for getting us to 2,000 subs, okay? I got to give 2,000 hugs to each and every one of you, man. Let's go. All right, this was another episode of Locked On Canucks. Coming up on other episodes, mentioned it before, Ilya Mikheyev. What did the Canucks do with him? Is it going to be a trade? Is it going to be a buyout? Is there any chance the Canucks keep him? We'll kind of look at all those scenarios, give odds on all those scenarios, and break down, what the Canucks can afford to do if they do move on from Ilya Mikheyev. All that and more on other episodes of Locked On Canucks. But I got to get out of here, okay? So on behalf of Kyle Bowen, on behalf of Locked On, I'm Trevor Beggs, and you've been listening to Locked On Canucks.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.